So I am Alistair Duggin. I'm the Head of Accessibility at Government Digital Service. For those of you that don't know or do know about Government Digital Service, we are probably most well known for gov.uk, which is the UK government's website that is used by all departments, and it's been designed in such a way to meet user needs and to be as simple and clear and easy to use as possible. It's also the home of all of central government's transactional services, so there's about 800 transactional services on it. So if people have to register for something, if they have to claim a benefit, if they have to get a permit, gov.uk is where they go to do these things. Something that we work hard at within GDS is to help the rest of the UK government make services as good as possible. We've got something called the Service Manual, which is basically guidance on how to build good digital services. And we make sure that we include lots of information about accessibility within the Service Manual. We also have something called the Design System, which is, has basically different styles and components and patterns that help teams create digital services that look like the rest of gov.uk. It makes sure that things are consistent and easy to use, and again, we've made sure that accessibility is built into all of these. We also work really hard to try to raise capability around government, focusing on user-centered design, and again, we have an accessibility community within this. We provide training. For lots of people, accessibility is quite a new thing, so there's a big challenge about how you raise capability and get people to understand how to make things accessible. So first of all, I'd like to talk about what we mean by something being accessible, because the term accessible means many different things to different people. So when I talk about accessibility, I'm talking about something that can be used by the widest possible audience. It's about making sure that there aren't any barriers that make something difficult or impossible for people to use. And it's about making sure that people with disabilities have equal access to the services that you're providing. Accessibility is about kind of taking into account and considering the range of human capabilities that people have. Far too often we design and build for the fictional average user. We presume that people have good vision, have good hearing, have good ability, and have good cognition. But the reality is that these things vary hugely. It's this diversity that makes us human. And if we're not considering this diversity when we're designing services, we will accidentally exclude people. In the world of digital accessibility, there are kind of 4 principles that help you understand what accessibility is. So I'm going to quickly whiz through these to set some context. So if you think about a digital service that is online, the first thing that needs to happen for somebody to be able to successfully use the service is that they need to be able to perceive the content that's being communicated by the service. If you have sight, can you see the things? If you've got hearing, can you hear the things? The next thing that needs to happen is that once you've received the information that's been communicated, that you understand it. If you don't understand the information, if you don't understand the content or the interface, you won't be able to successfully complete an action. The next thing that needs to happen is that you need to be able to successfully operate the interface. People use lots of different types of input devices. Not everybody uses a mouse or a keyboard, so you have to think about the different ways that people interact. The last thing is a thing called robust, which is about making sure that the digital services work with the technologies that people are using. So this could be somebody's browser, or it could be somebody's assistive technology like a screen reader or speech recognition software. If any one of these 4 things breaks down, somebody cannot have a successful interaction with your service. They will fail to complete the task that they have come to try to do. These 4 principles, they are affected hugely by our differences in capability, and most people don't realize kind of how many people with disabilities and impairments there actually are. Globally, there are over 1 billion people that experience disability, and that's 1 in 7 people. So if you're not considering accessibility, there's a lot of people that you're potentially excluding. The other thing to bear in mind is that impairments, they increase as we get older. So in the UK, there are only 8% of children that have a disability. At working age, it's 19%, but by the time we get to the age of 65, that number gets to 45%. So if we're lucky to reach old age, we have a 1 in 2 chance of having a long-term impairment of some sort. The other thing that's really important to bear in mind is that we have an aging population. So a country like Germany and the UK, we have an aging population, so these impairments are just going to become more and more common in the future. Also, we need to realize that it's not just permanent impairments that we need to think about. When we design for permanent impairment, we actually provide a benefit to people that have a temporary or a situational impairment. This is illustrated beautifully by the Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit. If you design something for somebody that only has one arm, this will also work for somebody that has an arm injury or is a new parent and is holding a baby. Equally, if you design something for somebody that is deaf, that will also work for somebody that can't hear due to a cold or due to being in a noisy environment. So let's go through some of the kind of use cases that we should be considering when we're designing services. So let's start with making sure that something works when you have limited vision. So you'll probably agree that this is really hard to read. This will especially be hard for people to read that have a vision impairment. If you do something as simple as make the text larger and increase the color contrast, you're going to remove the barrier for that person. But that's actually going to benefit most people. If you're outside in the glaring sunshine, or if you have a mobile device that has a cracked screen, you're going to benefit from that larger text that has a higher contrast. Let's think about designing something for people that have no vision. What's more and more common in lots of services like transport services and health services is the use of LED displays to communicate information to people. So this is taken from the New York substation. You can see what stop you're at and what the next stops are. But if you don't have vision, you're completely excluded from that information. The way to remove that barrier is to have audio announcements that communicate the same information. This will obviously help people that are blind, but this also helps people that may be in deep conversation, aren't paying attention to where they're going, or are reading a book. Equally, websites are visual mediums, so you may think, how can somebody use a website if they're blind? There are things called screen readers that convert text into audio, and if they're designed and built correctly, a blind person can listen to their website.
Welcome to gov.uk heading level 1. Blank. The best place to find government services and information. Simpler, clearer, faster.
So this is a screen reader that is reading out a web page to a person. For this to happen, the website needs to be designed and built in a certain way. The content needs to be in the page, and you heard things like main and heading being read out. If you're doing these sorts of things, you're not only helping people that are using screen readers, you're potentially helping emerging technologies like voice interfaces. The next video shows how you can use gov.uk using a voice interface. This has been made possible really easily because it already works for screen readers. So this is an example where thinking about screen readers gives
Main
other
region.
benefits.
Welcome to gov.uk heading level 1. Blank. The best place to find government.
Okay Google, how do I learn to drive a car?
Here's what I found on the web.
When can I start learning?
According to gov.uk, you can apply for a provisional driving license when you're 15 years and 9 months old. You can start driving a car when you're 17.
So the techniques used to make gov.uk work with screen readers made it incredibly easy to make this work for voice recognition like Google Access. Let's then think about usage without hearing. Hands up if you regularly use subtitles when you watch videos or TV. So subtitles were invented for people that can't hear. If you can't hear the audio and there aren't subtitles, you are excluded from the content that's going on. But subtitles are massively beneficial to people that don't hear as well. So I'm a new parent, it's been incredibly helpful having captions on Netflix so I can have those late nights of not disturbing my baby. Equally, if we look at this service, so this is the Renew Your Passport service from the Home Office in the UK. This service, when they first built this prototype, it required users to provide a phone number. For people that are deaf, they may not want to give you the phone number because they don't want to be communicated through a telephone. Some feedback that they had when doing some user research with a deaf person, I always find that very, very, very annoying with all online forms. They never give me the opportunity to say text only. So how do I let people know I don't want you to phone me? Now, this led the team to update the interface to give people a preference of how to be communicated. And this doesn't only help people that are deaf, this will help anybody that has a speech impediment, anybody that that suffers from anxiety and doesn't like using the telephone, or anybody that has a really busy job and can't answer the telephone during the daytime. Then we come to usage with limited cognition. So something that we strive to do on gov.uk is to make sure that the interface is as simple and as intuitive and consistent as possible. We focus on user needs, making things as simple to use as possible, and we make sure that the language that we use is as plain and simple as possible. This is what the register to vote, one of the steps in register to vote looks like. This is some feedback that we got from one of our users. On behalf of the applicant who just used the system and who has learning difficulties, I just wanted to say how much we appreciated the very clear type and simple language she was able to manage by herself. So if a service can be used with somebody with a learning disability, it will be able to be used by somebody suffering from a lot of stress or perhaps has your language as a second language. Finally, let's look at limited mobility. In the UK, lots of our train stations and tube lines don't have wheelchair access. So if you are in a wheelchair, you can't pick and choose which routes you get or which routes you take to get somewhere. If this was fixed, this would not only help people in wheelchairs, but this would help people in prams, this would help people carrying heavy luggage. So again, an example of designing for disability, helping everybody. Who's used Google Access, Google Voice Access or Siri on their iPhone? So the speech recognition technology was originally invented and developed for people with mobility impairments to enable them to use their computers. Again, massively beneficial if you're driving, if you're distracted. Quite often it is easier to interact with a computer through your voice than it is through a keyboard. So one of the things I really want you to take away from this is about how accessibility drives innovation, and it also helps you come up with better designs. Some of the big tech companies have really started to kind of get on board with this already. Apple, Microsoft, and Google are investing huge amounts of money in making their services and their products more accessible. This is partly so they reach a wider audience, but it's also because they understand the benefits of designing for human limitations and how it helps you improve the user experience for everyone. Microsoft, in particular, are really investing heavily in this and are making huge strides in the accessibility space and coming up with some really new, neat solutions at the same time. Have people seen the do's and don'ts of accessible design posters by the Home Office? So these were created off the back of some user researchers specializing in different access needs and bringing together best practices for how to make accessible interfaces. As you can see, there's a poster for low vision, for screen readers, for deaf and hard of hearing, for dyslexia, for the autistic spectrum, and for physical and motor disabilities. What's been really interesting about these is that they've gone viral. They've been translated, I think, into about 13 different languages, and they've been downloaded tens and thousands of times. What we see a lot when people see these and use these, they kind of say, well, this just looks like really good advice. Why does this just apply to somebody with a mobility impairment or somebody on the autistic spectrum? So I actually did a little exercise last week where I cut up all of the items in the posters and arranged them into different things. So it was quite clear that there was a lot of stuff based on good content design, lots of things on visual design, interaction design, and then some service design and some code bits. And it's a really good illustration of thinking about human capabilities and human limitations just helps you design better things. So the theme of this conference has been around crafting delight and delivering value. When you do make things accessible, absolutely, like people that are normally excluded from your services will be absolutely delighted to not face barriers and be frustrated as they normally do when they use services, because most services are not fully accessible. But equally, all your users will be delighted that it is more usable and more simple and accommodates kind of their specific needs if they have a temporary or a situational impairment. From the point of view of the delivering value, there's obviously, you will reach a far bigger audience if you have something that is accessible. But there's also things like you've got limited time and resources to do user research. If you're including people with limitations in your user research, you will find issues and solutions much quicker than if you aren't including people with access needs. You'll also find that as well as more people able to use your services, there'll be much less failure to demand. When digital services are fully accessible, you'll find that much fewer people end up having to be forced to use the face-to-face or the phone or the paper route, so you can really keep costs down by having truly accessible digital services as well. But the thing that I find most kind of powerful and most important around accessibility is that by designing with accessibility, we're designing with our friends, our families, and our future selves in mind. Like, surely we want our dearest and closest and ourselves to be used the services that we're designing in the future. Thank you very much.
Again, Alistair will join us on the panel in a few minutes, but if you have a specific question regarding his key talk, now's the chance. Our box is here. Go for it.
Yes, thank you very much. That was super inspiring and something I wrote my master's thesis on as well some years ago, so it's really great that it's still a thing. And I was wondering, what do you make of this rebranding the whole thing of accessibility? So my thesis was making accessibility sexy, in a way that it's not like, we're disabled people, we're doing something for these poor people. And what do you think, particularly of calling it inclusive design like Microsoft does? Do you think there's any value in that?
So I think it's hugely important to mainstream accessibility. So in that way, I'm completely on board with making it sexy, calling it inclusive design. But I think there is a danger that when you call it inclusive design, there's more a chance that you will actually forget about the people that don't have equal access due to the permanent impairments that they've got. So I believe, so Derek Featherstone talks about accessibility is kind of the characteristic of the thing, and inclusive design is the process to get there. Yeah.
Do we have another question for Alistair? There's one in the front.
Hi, okay. So just as ethics is being introduced into curriculums for like AI and data science, do you see that accessibility is being introduced in curriculums for design?
I don't think it's happening yet, and I really wish it was.
So it's
so I do quite a lot of accessibility workshops in government, and I also do these as part of the design, like for our design communities, and lots of designers, it's almost the first time that they've heard about accessibility when they hear me talk about it. So I would love to see it becoming kind of more in design courses and developer courses, and yeah, it needs the attention it deserves and the value it provides. Yeah.
Thank you.